So, Lunar Dave has asked me to do a video on Conquest Takumi, and I didn't want to admit the fact that I'm a fake gamer. So, even though I've never used or recruited or even know how to recruit Conquest Takumi, I agreed to do it. And I'm gonna use Veilbot to check how you use Conquest Takumi. And it looks like it's the Mercy effect. Okay, let's do a video on that. In most traditional RPGs, your goal could roughly be described as kill your enemy before they kill you. As a result, anything that is incapable of killing the enemy would be considered an undesirable nerf. However, sometimes special circumstances come up in which killing the enemy is actually an undesirable thing to do. The most iconic of these is False Swipe from the Pokemon games, which allows you to leave a foe at 1 HP, useful for catching wild Pokemon, as they are easier to catch when they are weaker, but if you reduce them to 0 and feint them, then you won't be able to catch them at all. Despite catching not being a core mechanic of most Fire Emblem games, the series still has occasionally dipped its toes into the well of False Swipe-esque effects. Unfortunately, these experiments have mostly been unsuccessful, but it is an interesting design space, so today I want to take a look at the various Mercy effects we've had in Fire Emblem, and see if I can find ways to fix them. So let's journey back to the first time Fire Emblem added a Mercy effect. No, it's not Radiant Dawn, actually it's Fire Emblem 6. Surprised? Well, that's because I'm being a pedantic little asshole and including the FE6 version of the Eclipse Tome. In the other GBA games, Eclipse cuts your HP in half, but in Fire Emblem 6, it actually reduces your HP to 1. Technically speaking, it is able to kill if someone has only 1 HP left, but that requires hitting with it twice, and that's not going to happen. I mean, hitting with it once is a big ask. And that's because the biggest flaw with the Eclipse Tome is it has incredibly low hit. Now, most weapons in the Binding Blade have much lower hit than their counterparts in other games, and as a result, you are regularly facing 60, 70, and 80% hit rates throughout the game. However, the Eclipse Tome really takes this to the next level, with a measly 10 hit. For context, most of the time you get more hit from your weapon than you do from your skill stat. However, if you have a skill stat larger than 5, you will be getting more hit from your skill stat than you are from the weapon. This leads to a situation where Eclipse almost always has a 0 hit rate, and as a result it is basically only useful for breaking walls since they can't dodge attacks. Now, at first glance, the way to fix the Eclipse Tome seems to be just give it more hit. However, there's a problem with this. Enemies also have the Eclipse Tome. In fact, quite frequently enemies have the Eclipse Tome, and while you might use Eclipse to set up kills for your weak units to train them, they're probably going to use Eclipse to kill your weak units. If you reduce someone's HP to 1, they can be finished off by anyone. As it stands, enemies with Eclipse are kind of a joke because they're going to have 3% or less hit rate on all of your units. However, if we were to buff Eclipse to say have a 50 in its base hit, you would suddenly face coin flips as to whether or not your unit dies from 3 to 10 range, and that feels unacceptable? Like, in a game with no save points and no turn wheel, having to reset the entire map or just accept that your favorite little scrunkly died because they got unlucky does not feel like good game design. So instead, I think the best approach is to give the weapon a unique quality. It has a base hit of 100 minus 10 for every tile away from you the enemy is. This means that at the minimum range of 3 tiles, it would have 70, a pretty respectable hit rate especially for the Binding Blade. But as you get farther and farther away, the hit rate is reduced, with the 10 tile hit rate giving you 0 hit from the weapon, relying purely on your skill and blind luck. As this effect is symmetrical, it would mean that enemy druids are unable to reduce you to 1 HP from super far away, but they might be able to if you let them survive and get too close. However, as magic users are very frail, if you get to the point where they're going to face good hit rates on you, you can probably kill them, especially if you're using higher movement units. I think this might make for an interesting game of cat and mouse against the enemy, and also make Eclipse a potentially useful tome for setting up kills for your weaker units. The biggest downside I can see is that this might be too strong against bosses, since you could utterly cheese them by just attacking from 3 range, reducing them to 1 HP, and then killing them with whoever else. But since you only get one 5-use Eclipse Tome in the game, I don't see this as being a huge problem. Sure, you could Hamurn it, or you could go Sakai for a second Eclipse Tome, but if you spend your Hamurn on Eclipse, then you're not spending it on Warp, which is a significant trade-off, and if you choose to go to Sakai, then you get to hang out with Monkey, so you should be rewarded for this by getting another Eclipse Tome. Also, let's be honest, there is at least one boss in Sakai that we all want to use the Eclipse Tome on, right? Okay, my pedantic interlude aside, let's move on to Radiant Dawn, where Elincia got the Mercy skill upon entering Part 4. Mercy is a skill that literally prevents you from killing the enemy, instead causing lethal blows to leave them at 1 HP. It is exclusive to Elincia and learned by her in the transition from Part 2 to Part 4. However, she can remove and relearn it at the base camp as you please. The intent behind this skill seems to be twofold. First is that in Part 3, she had a moment of character growth where she displayed mercy and non-combat stuff and yada yada yada, so it serves as a gameplay story integration moment to give her the mercy skill and show that she maintains that character trait. However, from a gameplay perspective, there is another, in my opinion, intended use for mercy, and that is grinding your scrubs up for the tower. You see, the way that Radiant Dawn is structured, you have a bunch of different armies doing things for the first 3/4 of the game, and then when you enter Part 4, everyone comes together and you split them up into 3 separate armies, who then travel to different lands, rejoin, and you send your 10 favorites into the tower. During that split portion of Part 4, you face almost exclusively route maps with a large number of enemy reinforcements. The intent seems to be an opportunity for you to grind up your favorites so that they are able to go into the tower if you so desire. And of the 3 armies, the one with the most grinding potential is the Hawk army, led by Elincia and Tabarn. You see, Tabarn is such a capable unit that he kind of doesn't need any help taking on his 2 Part 4 maps. If you give him Nullify to get rid of effective damage from crossbows, then he is effectively immortal. And while he lacks access to 1-2 range, he doesn't really need it. The few enemies he's unable to counter, he can just kill on player phase. As a result, you kind of don't need to send any strong units to the Hawk army, so you can instead fill it up with your possible training projects, which is where Elincia's Mercy comes in. Her being able to guaranteed set a unit to 1 HP regardless of crits or proc skills means that she can set up kills for your weak little scrumblies so that they can eat the juicy experience all for themselves. This is especially helpful on 4-5, where there are potentially infinite waves of Laguz reinforcements you can milk for their experience. If you've ever seen any clips of Edward or Meg killing Ashura, this is probably how they got that strong. The unfortunate downside is that if you leave the Mercy skill equipped, then Elincia kind of just isn't going to be a good combat unit. Yes, it's cool to set up kills for your scrumblies when available, but sometimes you just want to delete a dangerous enemy. If you want Elincia to be able to kill, she's not able to set up kills, and if you want Elincia to be able to set up kills, then she's not able to kill. I think the easy solution to this is just make Mercy an activated skill, similar to Gamble or Parity. If you have control over whether or not to kill the enemy, then there's no real reason to take Mercy off of Elincia. Now, while Mercy is incredibly easy to fix, Bane is a little bit more complicated. Bane is the signature class skill of the Tier 3 class Whisper. While most of the signature class skills pump your damage to absurd degrees and cause you to one-round the enemy, Bane causes you to reduce them to 1 HP. This is typically considered to be the worst of the Tier 3 class skills, and honestly, I agree. It doesn't kill, and the other ones all do, and because it's chance-based, you can't even intentionally use it to set up kills for other units. Its nature as a proc skill also means that fixing it by making it a gamble-type skill feels very out of character. If you choose to activate it, then it's very distinctly different from all of the other Tier 3 skills, and that just doesn't sit right with me. So instead, I've decided to add an additional effect to it. In addition to reducing the target's HP to 1, it imparts the stun status on them for 1 turn, meaning that they miss their next enemy phase action. One of the reasons that Bane feels so bad is that the enemy stays around till the next turn, whereas any other proc skill they wouldn't. By stunning them, we partially fix this problem by at the very least making them functionally not around for the next turn, but we also make it easier for them to be fed to whatever training project we want. If you proc Bane but your training project has already moved this turn, it feels like a waste. You can't feed that kill to them unless you're able to dance them. Now, you get another opportunity to feed the kill to them next turn. I still think that Bane is arguably the worst of the Tier 3 skills with these changes, but it does at least get better and it serves a purpose of feeding it to your other scrubs, as opposed to now just kind of feeling like, why did they put this in there? The next iteration of Mercy comes in the form of the unique weapon Takumi Shinai. Hey, Editing Danny here, and I need to interrupt real quick, because at the time that I recorded this, I was under the impression that Takumi Shinai was the only mercy effect in Fire Emblem Fates, but that's actually not true. In addition to Takumi Shinai, which is a katana, there is also Niles' bow, which is, fittingly, a bow. They have extremely similar effects, with the exception of the fact that Niles' bow is a bow, so it has more might, less hit, and is locked to 2 range. The stats are on screen. I didn't think this was a big enough deal to re-record my entire section on Takumi Shinai, but I did want to put the correction out there so that people were aware that there is a second mercy option in this game. It is a C-rank katana with 2 might, 85 hit, and a couple of special effects. First off, it reduces your avoid by 10. Because it's a katana, it boosts your speed by 1, but rather than reducing your defense and res by 1, it reduces them by 3. It has the mercy effect, so it can't kill foes that have more than 1 HP, and it can't make follow-up attacks. This means that most of the time, if you initiate an attack against a foe that has more than 1 HP, you will not be killing them. Even if you crit and boost your damage, it will still leave them at 1 HP. However, if you proc the skill Astra, as I found out in my Birthright 0% run, you can still kill them. If any of the first 4 hits of Astra reduce your foe's HP to 1, then the next hit will kill them, as they fulfilled the condition of having only 1 HP. Now, obviously, the best way around this is to just remove the Astra skill, as no other proc skill will cause you to hit multiple times, but it is kind of funny that this oversight still exists. So the first way that I would fix this katana is to remove the ability to proc skills. Either that, or make it so that the mercy effect applies to every hit in the round of combat, regardless of how much HP they have for that individual hit, as long as they had more than 1 HP at the start of combat. This would in turn prevent an attack stance partner from killing them when you reduce them to 1 HP. The next change is I would make it more available. As it stands, Takumi Shinai is available through base events in Birthright and Revelations, and as a reward for visitation on the now-defunct online features. Before the servers went offline, if you visited 650 other My Castles, you had the ability to get Takumi Shinai for yourself regardless of what route you're on. While the My Castle status indicates that this was likely meant to be a joke weapon, I do think it has a legitimate niche, either for setting up kills if you want to train someone, or, more importantly, capturing units that you want to capture. While there is definitely an argument to be had that certain segments of the community place too high of a value on Conquest capturing, I do still think it has some use, and the ability to reduce an enemy to 1 HP exactly could allow for easy captures on someone who you would otherwise struggle to set up a capture for Niles on. As a result, I think the biggest fix would be making one of these available in Conquest, either dropped or in a chest. I also don't see why you need to reduce the defense or resistance by 3, like, capturing isn't so strong that you should take an additional nerf when using a weapon to set up a capture. You're already spending at least 2 units turns in order to capture 1 enemy, so you're negative in action economy already. I don't think you need the additional trade-off of just making the weapon absolute ass. Like, while we're at it, why does it have 2 might? Personally, I would buff the might and make the defense resistance buff less just to keep it in line with other katanas with -1 each. Personally, if I were making this weapon, I would make it 5 might and 100 hit. That way it is the same hit as an unforged brass katana and 1 more might than it. The fact that it has innate mercy means that it is inherently going to be a niche weapon, and therefore making it slightly stronger than the E-rank katana isn't too much to ask in my opinion. Next up, we have my personal pick for the best iteration of the mercy skill, and that is the Subdue combat art, available in Shadows of Valentia and 3 Houses. And it's actually identical in both of those games, despite the fact that combat arts underwent a huge overhaul between those 2 games. Subdue has no additional cost, adds 20 hit to your attack, and grants the mercy effect, leaving the enemy at least 1 HP. The biggest downside is the lack of availability. In Shadows of Valentia, it is available on the Royal Sword and Beloved Zofia, both of which are PRFs of your lords, and the latter of which needs to be forged from the Golden Dagger for an extremely expensive cost in gold coins. It is also available on the Rapier, which requires a little bit of suboptimal forging, and the Emperor Lance, which is a rare dungeon draw. As a result, the most common instance of Subdue being available is Royal Sword Alm. Although once Alm promotes, he is capable of using the Killer Bow, and many players choose to opt for this instead of the Royal Sword since it tends to be better due to 1-2 range and the additional crit, while both of them have a Brave Combat art. Still, if it's going to be locked to one unit, I think Alm is probably the best candidate as he is the least experience-hungry unit in the cast, considering the nature of his promotion. Believe it or not, in 3 houses, the availability of Subdue is even worse. It is only available on your House Lords, Byleth, Edelgard, and Claude, meaning that in every run, only one unit is capable of getting it. And the reason for that is the mastery skill of the Lord class. There are multiple problems with this Subdue distribution. The first is that Lord is just not a very good class to go into, and none of the 3 units capable of going into it especially want it in their class routing. The second, and arguably more damning aspect of its availability, is that it is the mastery skill for an intermediate class, which means that this comes fairly late in a 3 houses playthrough. In my opinion, the most important experience thresholds to reach on time are level 10 by chapter 5. You pick a couple of units that you want in intermediate classes by then, feed them kills, position Byleth to give them extra experience, and try to focus as many levels into them as possible in order to give yourself better class access for one of the hardest maps in the game. Even if you've decided that your House Leader's build involves going through the Lord class, they're not going to get Subdue in time to help with reaching this experience threshold. By the time your House Leader unlocks the Subdue combat art, your team is likely competent enough to get kills on their own, and if they're not, you probably shouldn't be using those units. I do like the idea of Subdue being exclusive to the House Leaders, both from a flavor perspective, since they are sort of leading their classmates in this way, and from a gameplay perspective, since they already get the 1.2 times experience boost, and so they need less help getting kills than others do. However, the way that I would cause the Lords to learn Subdue is through leveling their authority skill. If an authority rank of C gave Edelgard, Claude, and Byleth the Subdue combat art, then this would mean you could potentially rush it in the early game and use it to set up your training projects. However, if it was irrelevant to you, you could put off their authority training, and then it's just a nice little bonus that you'll probably never use. As it stands, it's locked behind a class that most people don't go into anyway, and as a result, I don't doubt that a large number of you weren't aware Subdue is even available in 3 houses. Finally, in Fire Emblem Engage, the S-rank bond rings of Elincia and Soth give Mercy and Bane respectively. Here, I would make the same changes I made in Radiant Dawn. Mercy has an activated ability, and Bane has the extra stun effect. Personally, I still don't think that these S-rank bond rings would be worth using over the alternatives in your ring slot, but for the people who want to use them to set up their training projects, this would undeniably be an improvement. That's it for mainline Fire Emblem games. However, I do want to touch upon 2 other iterations of Mercy. The first is Tearing Saga Raquel. Raquel is an incredibly interesting unit. She is a pre-promoted sniper who joins you in Chapter 4 with incredibly good bases and some very good skills in Adept and Paragon. She has a Brave Bow in her starting inventory and is the only unit who's going to be able to use it for quite some time. However, she has one fatal flaw, and that is her hidden skill of Mercy, which prevents her from landing killing blows on humans. This means that if she's facing a human, anything that would kill them reduces them to 1 HP, and if they have 1 HP, the attack misses. This can be a little bit annoying because oftentimes she'll proc Adept and waste another use of a bow that you weren't planning on using, but I think it's less of a big deal than people make it out to be. Mercy is interesting on her for 3 reasons. The first is that she joins early enough that she could theoretically be considered a Jagan, and as a result, she sets up kills for others who want EXP. Eventually, the inability to one round will lead to her getting benched, and she fulfills her Jagan arc in that way. The second way that it's interesting, however, is that Mercy doesn't apply to monsters, and so if you send her with Holmes, there are plenty of maps where the only enemies are monsters, and she can just function as an incredibly competent sniper. However, the third, and to my mind most interesting wrinkle with her Mercy, is how it interacts with her brother. You see, Tearing Saga contains one of the more interesting Aaron versus Samson situations, where you have 5 units and you can choose 2 of them to bring into your party, and the other 3 will never join you. One of the possible units from this choice is Raquel's brother Luca. Luca is an incredibly underwhelming, unpromoted archer, and while he does have a couple of things going for him, he pales in comparison to some of the other options that you could choose in this Aaron versus Samson versus Samson versus Samson versus Samson situation. However, Raquel and Luca have 2 secret events with each other. The first one's not super relevant to our purposes, but the second one actually removes the Mercy skill at the cost of Luca's life. If both units are alive and deployed in Chapter 24, a cutscene will play at the end of the map where you are given the choice between killing Luca and removing Mercy from Raquel, or having Raquel cast out of the army due to her unwillingness to kill. At this point in the game, Mercy has long outlasted its usefulness. Anyone you wanted to train has already been trained, and as a result, Raquel is not really usable if she's not able to kill. Personally, I would say that dying to remove Mercy is the biggest piece of utility Luca offers you, and it makes the Aaron versus Samson versus Samson versus Samson versus Samson situation a little bit more interesting. You're not picking him, you're picking Raquel, just sort of delayed. Also, since I'm talking about this secret event already, I do want to take a moment to address some misinformation. All of the sources I can find online say that you need to recruit Luca early in order to get rid of Mercy. However, from testing, I can confirm late Luca also allows for this secret event to take place. All that you need to do is deploy both Luca and Raquel. It does not matter whether it is early Luca or late Luca, you are able to get this event regardless. With that out of the way, I want to touch on another approach to a Mercy Jagan, and that is from the ROM hack The Four Kings. In The Four Kings, every single unit has a personal weapon, and Zachary, the Jagan of the game, has a weapon called the Restrainer. This weapon has the Eclipse effect, the FE7 and 8 Eclipse effect, in that it cuts the enemy's current HP in half, and is unable to double. In the early game, Zachary one-rounds most enemies, as every good Jagan does. However, you may still want to set up kills for your other units, and one of the easier ways to do this is by having Zachary use the Restrainer. However, Zachary is actually force deployed for the entirety of the game, and as a result of him being a Jagan, his combat falls off pretty hard. As such, around the halfway point of the game, the Restrainer becomes his best way of dealing damage. The fact that the weapon has the exact same effect and yet it manages to function very differently at different points in the game is an incredibly cool piece of design. And the Restrainer is a big part of why I think Zachary is one of the best designed Jagans in ROM hacking. So that about wraps it up for today's video. In case you're not aware, today, December 14th, is Takumi's birthday. Hey, editing Jenny here. This time I'm sick. The project ended up being delayed, so it's not Takumi's birthday anymore. I would have re-recorded, but I'm sick and sound awful. And as such, this video is part of a larger collaboration with many creators, where we all make videos about Conquest Takumi. I've linked a few people's creations below, so if you haven't already seen them, check them out. And a big shout out to Lunar Dave for organizing this whole thing. It was an incredibly cool and wholesome way to get the community together in order to gaslight our collective fandoms. I'm happy to have been a part of something like this, and I hope y'all enjoyed my contribution. Anyway, have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. I do want to take a moment to thank my patrons: Jamie Collins, Marin Karen, Thick Mulder, George Grenville, the 7th PM, Daniel Kalaskis, Jagan is Nest, Tailored Muffin, Dr. Majalis, Herc, SUP, Gabe the Green, and Control Alt Aegis. Thank you so much for your support. It means the world for me, and is the only reason that I'm willing to power through this headache to put a video out today, because otherwise I wouldn't want to do that. So thank you for your support. I really appreciate it.